No. Good evening, friends. When we started off the journey of celebrating 75 years of Constitution, before that, we did a lot of homework as to whom we have to call. Amongst them, few names which struck were of Justice Roshan Dalvi and Justice Manju Goyal. And those they have already done sessions with us. Therefore, taking further on that, on part 54th part, we are today going to discuss about the fundamental duties with the environmental protection, with special emphasis on Article 51, capital A, G of the Indian Constitution. And once we have Justice Roshan Dalvi, there would I always feel that the best way to get the introduction is from Justice Dalvi, who has been a pillar and who has stood as a rock with us. I'll not take much time, and I will request ma'am to share her insights on this journey, and then over to Justice Manju Goyal. Over to you, ma'am. Justice Dalvi.
Hello, friends. Vikas, thank you for calling me. I was just thinking when I read about Manju's topic, that this topic about environment, our Constituent Assembly members thought 75 years ago, when there was not much furor about environment pollution, climate change, environment protection, etc. All these terms have come later after the Environment Protection Act and after the world has risen to this crisis. And friends, the duty of each of the citizens that has been laid down thereafter in the Constitution are for protection, preservation, and also prevention from degradation of our environment. We have done some work in solar panels. America has done some work in reconstituting damage from the oil. Netherlands in the wind turbines. Sweden, through Greta Thunberg, has taken it as a crisis. UK, after it was done, they say their GDP rose 60% and the expenses were 40%. China came out first with electric cars, and now we feel that's not enough, because at the time, at the place where the cars are, there may be environment protection to an extent, but the engines require coal, cobalt, and lithium. And all of these are fossil fuels, and we should not use them. So our duty is in not doing as well as in doing. They say the 4 R's are reduce, refuse, recycle, and another is reduce, refuse. I forget one more. So each of these things we can do at individual level. Our government has to do on governmental level in a book called Climate Capitalism.
Ma'am, that was reduced. That was reduced.
Hello?
That is reduce, yes. Reuse and recycle.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, and refuse. First, refuse. If you can't refuse, then reduce. After reducing, reuse and recycle. All these 4 things must be done. Anyway, the book Climate Capitalism I'd like to talk about a little bit. It is by Akshat Rakhi and John Macaulay Hallett. And it talks about how capitalism can be preserved with also various socialistic measures for green cement, carbon capture, renewable power, and electric cars. So therefore, friends, it requires policies of the government, technology by the experts, finance also by the financial experts. And all this bring together new business opportunities, new startups, etc. So this is a duty which will beget opportunity. It is not only a duty that we are going to do to our country, we are going to get so much from our country. And as they say, it is easy to make a desert rather than a forest. Human beings cannot live without Mother Earth, but Mother Earth can live without human beings. And we can be wiped off if there is just no retrograde on this degradation. This is, of course, not constitution but environment. You plan a plant, they say. But in some of our constitutional cases, the environment protection aspect has been laid down. And one that I liked very much was the reference in the case of Usman Ghani Khatri versus Cantonment Board Pune. In all probability, Manju will talk about this judgment. I will not stop felling the trees because there is life in it. I will not stop cutting the branches even though it belongs to the tree. I will not stop taking out the leaves even though they become green and give us green energy because I need a hut. That, friends, sums up what is environment degradation in our country. So then I think I rest and Manju will take on for the constitution.
Well, thank you, Vikas, and thank you, Roshan.
You're
She has
welcome.
always been a support to me, and she gives me confidence that I can also contribute to your this great endeavor of this celebration of 75 years of Constitution of India. I have chosen to speak on fundamental duties because not much is said about the duties. And from the very beginning, we are only told about the rights. I remember having gone to a scholar to ask for his advice on duties. So he laughed and laughed. He said, "You see, for 30 long years, Indians were only told about the rights. And when rights have gone to their bones, then the constitution says, no, no, rights are not all. You also have duties. Now, who is going to hear about duties? If you start talking about duties, nobody will hear you. Or if you write, nobody is going to read you. Nonetheless, I thought, you see, the rights, if the duties are left only ornamental, then certainly there is no point in laboring on that. But if the duties have something to do with the day-to-day life and it needs to be implemented and it can actually be implemented and we don't know it is actually being implemented. And if you violate those fundamental duties, you may find yourself in the jail. So I thought, why not tell people about how the duties are working with us? And of course, we must motivate ourselves and others that duties are not to be treated as merely ornamental. Duties, with Indians particularly, duty is the same as dharma. So for Indians at least cannot ignore duties. So, or whether it is in the constitution or not. Now, before I begin, I must tell you that this study on environment was done in the March month of May when I had an intern from the National Law University of Lucknow, Miss Sara Gaur. And she did a beautiful job by helping me finding out things, whatever assistance I needed in doing my study. So, with this little acknowledgement to her, I begin. Now, when we talk about the environment, we naturally refer to the Stockholm Declaration, 1972. That was the first time for when the international attention was drawn to the issues of environmental pollution. It was at the initiative of Sweden. I remember having seen a beautiful photo of the delegates coming to the conference where the declaration was issued. They are all properly, formally dressed into suit and tie, but they are all riding their bicycles. That's kind of maybe you can say it's only what do you say? Just to make a show of their concern for for environmental welfare. But nonetheless, I say lesser the cars, more the cycles, or more the cars, less more the cycles, less the cars. So to that extent, there is some message in that. Now, with this, let me come to our own journey in environment, particularly with reference to the fundamental duties. Now, as she said, fundamental duties came later in 1976-77 when this 42nd Amendment came. Two things came together. One is the fundamental duty, 51A, and the other is the directive principle, 48A. Now, 51A, let me read out for ready reference. I know my audience knows about 51A. It shall be the duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. This is just one sentence, but I'm tempted to read it again. To protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. And when it comes to 48A, it directs state to endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forests and the wildlife of the country. So environment, of course, is a wide term. It includes not only the forest and wildlife, but much more. But specifically, forest and wildlife has been given some extra weight. Now, two provisions have to be read together because one alone may not be sufficient. Two certainly makes it more heavy and makes it more workable. So the purpose of my study is to examine whether the two provisions, which are generally said to be only ornamental, unenforceable, have had any impact on the legal discourse. Sorry. The first environmental matter that came to the Supreme Court, at least the first important environmental matter, if there is any previous one, I have not found it. The first important matter that came to the Supreme Court was about the hills of Sahasradhara. The Sahasradhara is in Shivaliks. It is still is, I will not use the word was. So at one time it was in an area of lush green vegetation, numerous streams flowing through them, and people downstream enjoying a bath in that flowing water. The water is said to be healthy for therapeutic purposes. This is sulfur rich, naturally sulfur rich. Plus, as Indians always do, whenever they see beauty, they remember God, and all beautiful places naturally become places of worship. So it also became a place of worship. Now, at the foothills lived a simple tribal community with their huts and their, domestic animals. And depending upon the rivers that or streams that flowed down the slopes of the hills. Now, this importantly, those hills had deposit of limestone, and government allowed the miners to take out limestone from those hills. So the limestone is valuable for the construction industry. It's valuable to the government because it yields revenue. And perhaps knowingly or unknowingly, they ignored the environmental aspect of mining. Now, when the mining started, the streams started drying up, and the villagers faced the consequences of the drying up streams. The streams importantly had three important river originating there: Baldi, Son, and Respanam. These were the major tributaries to Ganga. Now, there was a group of social workers who used to work with the tribals. And when they found the agony of the tribals caused by limestone mining, those simple social workers wrote a letter to the Supreme Court of India. This was taken notice of, and the Supreme Court of India directed that this letter be registered as a writ petition. Supreme Court found that it's not only the illegal miners, because their target was illegal mining. They could not target the illegal mining. So, but the Supreme Court thought it's also the legal miners who are affecting the atmosphere or environment. So the Supreme Court issued notice not only to the legal miners, but about 100 miners who had legitimate licenses from the government. The Supreme Court also issued notice to the government of Uttar Pradesh and also to the collector of sorry for the disturbance. This fly is happy with me, it looks. So the hearing went on and on for a long time, and several orders were passed. And there was this debate as to whether this legal right given by the government and they having not kind of violated any rules or regulation, whether that should win or the environment should win. The Supreme Court ultimately said you close down all the mines, not only those who had license from the government, but also those who had no license, and save the environment once for all. And there was a beautiful report given by a committee, because Supreme Court appointed committees heard large number of people, whether they were kind of parties to the case or not. And I'm tempted to read out a part of the report that tells you exactly the hazard caused by the mining of limestone uphills. This is a small 2 paragraph. Please bear with me. The vegetation cover along the slopes has been damaged by the rolling material as well as the excavation made for the road making, and hills present an ugly look. Hydroseeding may be done to improve the looks of the hills. Deposition of debris in the nalas, especially in Betarli, is the cause of concern because it happens to be one of the main streams which is the source of water supply to villages as well as Dehradun city. The approach road has reached the top and mining operations have been started, but no work on reclamation of mined out area has yet commenced. Before a quarter of a century, Yamuna was having adequate water flow throughout the year. Unlike the Ganges, which has her main tributaries originating from the snow-clad origins of the mountain range and melting snow in summer, helping the tributaries to be perennial. The Yamuna used to receive the bulk of her water from the streams joining her in the lower region. The Doon Valley used to receive sumptuous rains during the season. The tree roots helped the water to be stored. The limestone mines operated as aquifers. The stored water was released in a continuous process, and that stored water was released in a continuous process, and that streams, even without the support of melting stone, provided perennial supply to Yamuna. Assured by such supply, the twin cities of Masuri and Dehradun grew up. Lower down, hundreds of villages and small towns had also sprung up. So eventually, all the mines had to be stopped, and the Supreme Court said that a price has to be paid. That has to be paid for protecting and safeguarding the right of people to live in healthy environment with minimal disturbance of ecological balance and without the avoidable hazards, environmental hazards. And of course, the industrialists working there had to suffer their losses. And for that, the Supreme Court made certain directions to reduce their losses. So this is the first opportunity where the Supreme Court in so many words has used both these provisions, and the Supreme Court's hands were strengthened because of these two provisions which came only in 76, 77. And I will say that clearly these two provisions are not merely ornamental. They have their effect. Now, the next story that I'm going to tell you about is the housing project in Noida. Now, Noida, you know, is a city adjoining Delhi. The properties in Noida are very valuable, and on account of heavy load of population on Delhi, the people are, most people working, many people working in Delhi are planning to shift to Noida or the other satellite towns like Faridabad, Gurgaon, like that. So Noida is a very precious area where people, where this story says, it talks about is a housing project. Now, this housing project was in an area in which there were many trees, many old tall trees. And those tall trees were cut down. And the project started when the attention was given to it by the environmentalist. Particularly in this case, it is the very well-known name of Goda Varman. Now, Goda Varman challenged this housing project, saying that the trees cut were so large in number that they constituted a forest as per an earlier order of the Supreme Court. And they also said that environment clearance had not been obtained by the housing project, either from the central government or from the state government. And finally, this project was next to the bird sanctuary, Okla Bird Sanctuary, which is very precious. Now, he said that if you have a housing project so close to the bird sanctuary, the birds will not arrive in the winter as they always do. But these people said, the investors there said that we are building up a beautiful housing project. It's going to have a lot of greenery. We are going to plant trees and we are going to do landscaping. And it will be a beautiful thing to see. We will not disturb the environment. But then finally, the Supreme Court agreed with the environmentalists and said that no, you cannot do it. At least the bird sanctuary was, I think, the turning point, which certainly would have been affected had large number of people started living next to the very next to the bird sanctuary. So that is how this case was decided in favor of Goda Varman. And the housing project, with all the investment that they had already done, had to be stopped. Now, a similar case was of Vimla Devi. Vimla Devi, this case is reported as Vimla Devi versus State of Rajasthan. Now, Vimla Devi had a mining license, and the area in which she was to do her mining was subsequently declared to be a forest area. And she was asked to stop the mining. Now, she said she has her own fundamental right under Article 19. And she had started her mining before the area was declared to be a forest. And at least during the tenure of the license, she cannot be stopped. But again, the Supreme Court said, Supreme Court examined that notification for declaring that area as forest. And the Supreme Court agreed with the government here and said, no, although you have invested in the project, since the government has taken care of the environment, the government has issued this notification in view of Article 51A and 48A. Your right under Article 19(1)(g) cannot be respected. So your right is subject to the fundamental duty and directive principle. So this was given preference in this way to the legal right. Legal right supported by the Constitution. It's not only legal right, one can say this is a constitutional right to carry on the business or trade that one wants to. And here she also had a license from the government. And similarly, there was one very important case of this Hindustan Zinc Limited, again in Rajasthan. And Hindustan Zinc Limited had a captive generating company. Now, captive gencos were directed by one notification of the Rajasthan Electricity Regulatory Commission, which said that you have to buy a minimum quantity of green energy, minimum quantity of energy produced by renewable sources. If you don't, then you are liable to a penalty. So this order was issued to all the captive generating companies and also to the other open access consumers. Now, this was challenged in the Supreme Court by the Hindustan Zinc. And it said the whole purpose of Electricity Act 2003 is to encourage private production in electricity. And what they are doing is obstructing or sort of preventing the private generating companies from generating electricity. Can I continue? Now,
Yes, Manju.
yes. Now, again, the Supreme Court said that there were two notifications. These two notifications had been issued to protect the environment. And their right to generate electricity in the private sector will have to be obeyed only subject to the implementation of 51A and 48A. Since the purpose of regulation was to protect the population, the people at large. So it says for the interest of the larger number of people, the individual interest must be sacrificed. So in this manner, Hindustan Zinc lost the case and the two notifications of the Rajasthan Electricity Regulatory Commission were saved. Now, interesting part is tiger. Did we ever think how tiger is important for environment? The tigers live on the herbivores. When the tigers live on herbivores, they keep the herbivores population under check, under control. If there are no tigers, herbivores eat up all the vegetation. And when the vegetation is lost, the water is also lost. There is much less storage of water and much less flow of water. So this, again, this Goda Varman, he is a tireless environmentalist. He approached the Supreme Court for protection of tigers. And in this again, this writ petition that went on and on, I believe it is still there because I found an order of 2024. So Supreme Court has been monitoring the implementation of the several acts, the Forest Conservation Act, Wildlife Conservation Act, and things like that, and to see to what extent the officials dealing with the forest are responsible for violating the rules and regulations. So in one of the orders, the Supreme Court laid down certain principles principles to be followed in preserving the flora and fauna. First of all, the Supreme Court said no non-forest activity can be permitted in any forest. Nobody can enter a reserved forest or a sanctuary without permission. Protection has to be given to those national park and sanctuaries. Compensatory afforestation has to be managed. And tigers have to be saved. So this judgment had immense impact on the preservation of tigers in this country. Other judgments ask the government, ask the officials there to stop picking and uprooting certain plants and trees, removing any timber or felling trees. Very importantly, in another judgment, the Supreme Court stopped felling of trees. This was again T.N. Godavarman's doing. And the Supreme Court said not a tree can be felled without proper permission. The Supreme Court could not absolutely stop felling of trees because many industries depended on the trees, and those living in the forest had their livelihood from the trees. So they also needed the trees sometimes to be felled, as she was saying, my hut, maybe not only hut, but maybe other things. And therefore, the Supreme Court did not altogether stop felling of the trees, but it said felling of the trees has to be regulated and no tree can be felled without the sanction from the government. Now, finally, I will come to the river, our national river, Ganga. Ganga is said to have a celestial origin, and Ganga agreed to come down to the earth from the heavens in order to give life to the ancestors of King Bhagirath. And that is how she got her name, Bhagirathi. We fondly give her other names like Janhavi, Mandakini, Alakananda. The best part of Ganga, of course, flows into Bangladesh when it takes the name Padma. The river is so sacred, it is said, that a bath in it can remove all the obstacles to moksha. Be that as it may, the urbanization and industrialization on the banks of the river cause tremendous damage. M.C. Mehta, the eternal, what should I say, the permanent name in PIL, particularly with reference to environment, noticed the degradation done to the river by the tanneries in the city of Kanpur and the areas around that place. The effluent from the tanneries is said to be 10 times more dangerous than the effluent in the domestic sewers. Some tanneries would just release the effluent in the domestic sewers, and some would directly release it to the river. The plant which treats that effluent before it is released is said to be extremely expensive, extremely costly, and so people try to avoid going into that exercise of implementing or putting in place that machine for cleaning up or treating that effluent. Now, here, of course, they had no legal right. These tanneries had no legal right, like in the previous ones, that they had a government sanction or something like that to release the effluent into the river. So, the Supreme Court again continued to monitor how the regulations are implemented and passed several orders from time to time. And it said, however much be the cost of that plant for treating that effluent, that has to be put in place. Otherwise, you can't set up a tannery. The Supreme Court said, just as you cannot set up a factory without paying the minimum wages, you cannot set up a tannery without taking care of the discharge of the effluents. So again, this is how this provision of environment protection given by Article 51A and Article 48A were put into effect, and actually based on these two articles, these orders were passed. And what has the government done? Has the government done anything? Is it only courts and the activists? It is actually a joint responsibility for all of us, the courts, the government, the citizen. The NGOs. The government has started this Swachh Bharat mission and has started the Ministry of Jal Shakti. And we have NGOs like Sulabh International, and there are other NGOs working in the area. And although we have to go a long way now, it's not that after all this we have reached our destination. Our destination is far, far away, and we have to continue to work. But in this journey, these two provisions, I must say, have worked as wheels to a cart. So we are there, and we continue to support the implementation of these two provisions. And also, I must make a small mention about the National Green Tribunal, which is looking after so many cases of pollution to the environment. Now, before I conclude, I must pay my tribute to the forefathers, to the rishis of the past, who gave us the mantra for peace. When Indians 10,000 years back thought of peace, they thought of peace not only to mankind, but also to the environment, to the land, water, sky, and beyond, to the forests and the trees and the plants and the animals. So I will finish this just as we finish any other worship for any deity with the Shanti mantra. I will finish today's session, my presentation, with this Shanti mantra. Allow me. Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithvi Shanti Rapah Shanti Aushadhaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarva Shanti Shanti Reva Shanti Sama Shanti Redhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Ma'am, it was a fantastic session. You have taken us on all wide spectrum. I was just thinking what questions could be asked, but I realized subsequently that you have taken everything, that how the Indian courts have interpreted in respect of environment, what are the judicial principles which have been established, how the individual role can be done. I can only request Ma'am Dalvi, if she's there. I'm just checking it out.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So there cannot be a better person than Justice Dalvi to give a summary of that, what Justice Manju Goyal has taken across the wide spectrum in a crisp 45 minutes of a session. Over to you, ma'am, Justice Dalvi.
Yes, I am reminded of Greta Thunberg from Sweden, who as a child activist said, "How dare you do this?" to all the adults. And she said, "You have to maintain this for the next generation, and we have the right to the environment." That was her clarion call. And she said, "I'm here to say that our house is on fire. I want you to act as you would in a crisis." She is today a great environmentalist. And I remember that in Yellowstone National Park, there used to be so many deer who used to eat up so much of vegetation, and there was a lot of environment degradation, as we say. They introduced the wolves and they restored the balance. So this is how nature's balance works. The carnivores, the herbivores, omnivores all work together, even amongst humans. Okay? And so our tiger and their wolves say the same story. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can just sum up that, like what you said, that do not ask what the country has done for you, but ask what you have
Yes.
done for the country.
Correct. And that is how she said that it is joint responsibility. We should not only wait for the government to do that, we should also do that. And that is what our NGOs are doing. Small little things. I'm going now next week to one Vigyan Ashram in village Pabal, 70 kilometers from Pune. It is a modern day Gurukul school. It is like Gandhiji's Nai Talim, hands-on experience on lifelong learning and experiential learning in agriculture, environment, energy, engineering, and food processing. You see, there are so many people who are doing that. The least we can do is not to degrade it, to save little water, to save some air, to make something, one more tree, which can give oxygen, I'm told, for 4 hours to 4 persons. One tree. So all that makes up our land.
Thank you. And we will sum up the today's session that I is illness and we is wellness. So we all believe that we should work together for the better being of the society, not only in India, but pan across the world. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay blessed. Namaskar.
Namaste. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody, for hearing.
Thank you.